So the next review I'm going to be doing in this series of reviews is going to be the 2013 remake of the 1976 film Carrie, which was based on a book by Stephen King. Now, to preface this, I have never read the original Carrie by Stephen King. Stephen King is not an author that I really enjoy reading all that much. Well, again, to preface even more, I think I elaborated on this a little bit in my World War Z review, but I am not much of a book reader. Not in the sense that I hate books or that I think anyone who reads books is wrong. It's just not my form of entertainment. Like, if I have to indulge in a media format, film is certainly it. Film is something I really enjoy. It is how I like to have my entertainment, my stories presented to me, because I'm a much more visual person and I take in more information with visuals than I do with just word. Because I feel like when something's written, despite the fact that it's coming from one author, and so you understand that everything that is created by that author is from their head, there's usually little to no input from anyone else. So whenever they say something, it's their voice. You understand it. With a film, you have a director, you have a producer, you have a composer, you have an editor, you have a cinematographer, you have electricians, you have lighters, you have gaffers, you have production assistants. Just go down the list. There's a million people that work on movies, and it's a huge project to undertake to make a film. And that's why it's actually a little hard to critique films, because you have to realize that a book, at least it's only one person and their ideas, and it's like, well, you just basically critique that one person and their ideas. With a movie, it's much harder because there's so much time, there's so many people, there's so much energy being poured into making this. It really made me start thinking about the Carrie film from 1976 that was done by Brian De Palma. And the reason I started thinking about it was because, well, not despite the fact that this movie is considered a classic, which it is. It's a great movie. It's a wonderfully made movie. It does have problems, and some of the problems I noticed going back and watching it before going to see the remake. Some of the issues I found were some odd editing. There were some acting choices that I thought were really weird, not necessarily in casting, but just specific choices in how to portray emotion in some scenes. But that is basically my reference going into the new Carrie movie. That film, it's not like I read the book and so it's like, okay, so now I compare the 1976 to the book, and now I can compare the 2013 to both of those previous works. I just have the previous movie. So using the first movie as a reference for this one, I honestly have to say I really did not like this remake. I know it's gotten some praise from a couple of specific critics, especially on its modernization of some of the major plot points, but otherwise, there's a lot of points in this movie where it's beat for beat, frame for frame, a flat out just exact same thing as the original. And to me, a lot of the times it's if you can't bring much else new to it, I don't see much of a point in remaking it. Unless you felt that there was something incredibly detrimentally wrong, or you felt like there's a brand new way that you can interpret something. I don't really feel the need for movies to be remade. That doesn't mean I don't want them to be remade. They can always surprise me, but for this one, the only major difference I really saw from the previous film to this film was the way that the bullying is carried out, which for anyone who obviously understands bullying of the 21st century, a lot of it is cyberbullying now. It's using texting, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as basically bullying methods. And the major scene I'm talking about is the tampon throwing scene, which is basically the scene that starts off the movie. This is a scene that ends up getting recorded on the main bully, Chris's phone, and she puts it on YouTube. Now, I understand that this is something that has been going on a lot, especially if you look at the news recently. There's a lot of kids that are, especially the one I'm thinking about in particular is the Steubenville rape case, where the teenage boys that raped the girl who was the victim in that case were stupid enough to record it. They were stupid enough to record themselves raping her and dumping her on her lawn. Like, I'm amazed at the stupidity of the kids in these stories, that they somehow think it's super funny and that they won't get caught or punished for recording something, for basically having evidence of a crime that they committed. You know, in comparison, the tampon throwing thing in Carrie is almost weak in comparison. I do think that the bullying portrayal is something that's interesting to add to the story of Carrie, but I don't think it's worth building on the whole film. Like, they use the video that's recorded for the tampon scene during the prom scene. Like, when was that set up? Like, when did these kids somehow figure out the AV system to project a video that was on one of their cell phones in the gymnasium that is holding the prom? Really? I'm supposed to believe that? I'm supposed to believe that these idiot teenagers who were stupid enough to post a video of them bullying someone on YouTube, and they couldn't figure out how to hide their identity after doing so, they can figure out how to project it at the moment when she gets all the pig blood dumped on her head. I don't think so. Part of me just has such a hard time believing a lot of what happens in this movie. I think the major reason for that is because I don't like the casting choices in this movie. And what I mean by that is specifically for Carrie, the girl who plays her, Chloe, oh, I totally forget her last name, but she's a famous actress that a lot of people really like, because I think she was in Kick-Ass. I've never seen Kick-Ass. I've only seen her in, I think, a handful of other things, like maybe one or two other things. I thought she was okay, but I've never seen her as like a great actress. In this, I honestly despise the acting choices that she made, and I don't think she is the type of girl that would get bullied. This is more an issue of the fact that kids are cruel and they'll just pick on anybody who they see as weak. And that's perfectly reasonable. You know, there's lots of people who, you know, you would look at and say, you know, you look a certain way, so why would you get bullied? And I can honestly, and I feel like I can say this now because when I was younger, I was severely bullied. I was bullied a lot. And I was bullied to the extent where I was physically assaulted on a regular basis. And I ended up switching schools twice because of it. So when I tell people, you know, I was bullied a lot as a kid, sometimes I get the reaction of, really? You? But it's like, it can really happen to anybody. And it's mainly that kids are cruel and they pick on people that are weaker than them. It's not necessarily has anything to do with how they look. But the reason that Carrie gets bullied a lot is a combination of multiple factors. So with the first film, though, I believed when Carrie was bullied, and I feel like she was bullied for a long time. In this one, I just don't believe that she was bullied for years leading up to this. I feel like she was bullied for maybe the 2 weeks that were leading up to the prom. I feel like she's a very pretty girl, and I'm sorry, no one can deny that. Like, even when she was wearing her ratty clothes and like had her disheveled hair and she just kind of looked homely, she still looked pretty. And so I find it so hard to believe that she would be detrimentally bullied over the course of her whole high school career, which is what we're made to believe. We're made to believe that she's been bullied for a long time, and the final project is what happens at the end of the film. In the first film, in the Brian De Palma version, you genuinely believe that she'd been bullied for a long time. The volleyball scene at the very beginning gave us a strong hint of that. And there were also many hints across the whole school that she was bullied a lot. Like, you see, there's one scene where she's just kind of walking by the gymnasium and seeing the girls all getting punished, and it says, Carrie White eats shit. And they do have that in this movie, but it's more in Carrie's face in this film than it was in the first film. In the first film, she didn't even see it. Like, she wasn't necessarily aware of the graffiti that had her name on it. It felt like this is just something that happens all the time to her, and she's eventually just kind of grown accustomed to it in a way. Whereas in this film, it felt like there were basically 2 to 3 major incidents. One of which was the tampon scene. The other which was seeing her name graffitied on lockers, and then the prom scene. Like that's really all it felt like to me. It just felt like there were these three major scenes where she was bullied, and then she just kind of goes nuts and does her psychic thing. Whereas in the first film, I genuinely feel like she had been bullied for a very long time leading up to it, and that was just the thing that kind of broke it. Another thing I really don't like in this movie is the portrayal of her psychic abilities. I don't know if they explain this more in the book, but there's a scene where she seems to have pyrokinesis. There's a difference between having telekinesis and pyrokinesis. I don't know if in the book they say that she also has pyrokinesis, which is the ability to start and control fire, but telekinesis is not the same thing as pyrokinesis. So telekinesis is that you can move things with your mind, and in the first film, they did not have her controlling fire. It was just that it was just that she had moved things to the extent where electrical wires were shorting out and they were causing fires. So that was really the extent of it. But in this movie, there's like things where she literally locks her mother into the cupboard closet before she goes to the prom, and she melts the lock. So she would have to have pyrokinesis in order to do that. Now, again, I don't know if in the book that was explained, but to me that was weird to see her have this sort of side ability that is not emphasized anywhere else in the movie. And especially because they show her practicing with it. They show her in specific scenes where she's like lifting herself and the bed off the floor and her books and things like that. I always felt like Carrie White didn't understand the powers that she had. Like, there's a couple of scenes where she's in the library and she's reading up on it, but I always genuinely felt like she didn't know how to control it, and she didn't know what caused it emotionally, or how her mind would react to it. So when the climax happens, it feels genuinely like it's just raw emotion and rage that's coming out. Whereas in this one, you see her practicing it, so you realize that she has a sense of control over this, and that it almost makes her look like a villain in the end. It almost makes her look like the bad guy because she's so aware of what she's doing. In the first one, she seemed so zoned out and seemed like she was in a daze that it was just sheer emotion that took over. But in this one, it just seemed like she was much more cold about it, like almost like there was no emotion over it. I will say that Julianne Moore's portrayal of the mother I actually enjoy probably the most in this movie. She's probably the aspect of this film that I really enjoy. And I actually kind of think I like her portrayal of the mother more than the actress from the first movie, despite the fact that I think her look in the first movie was very appropriate for the time and for that film. I think that Julianne Moore hits more of the psyche of the person, of that type of person, the person who literally sees everything that she does as a sin, where her entire life is engulfed by her religion and is just so psychotic about it, and it's so creepy the way she does it sometimes. There's some scenes where she just looks downright nuts, and it's amazing. I think she does a really good job with it, but otherwise, there's a lot of actors in this movie. I think I totally forget the woman's name, but the woman who plays Miss Desjardins, I thought she did a pretty good job. I kind of like what's the woman's name? Betty. I totally forget her name, but she's like a really famous actress. The woman who played the teacher in the first movie. I actually think I like her portrayal of it more, though. But not to say that. Judy Greer, that's what her name is. I thought her portrayal in this film was fine. I just liked the original a little bit better. I do know that this movie does stick with the book in the sense that the teacher is the only person that Carrie saves when she goes nuts at the prom. She levitates her off the floor, and then she like completely destroys everyone else that's in the building. The ending I also didn't really like, and there's two parts about the ending that I really don't like. The first one that I want to talk about is the main villain, Chris, and her boyfriend. They just act straight up psychotic about getting Carrie. It's not about, humiliating her. It's about fucking killing Carrie. And that's not what I thought in the first movie. In the first movie, you know, Yeah, there is that end scene where they're driving and, Carrie's walking down the road and, she takes hold of the car and she acts like she's going to go run over Carrie. And so, yes, you can see that there's that sense of the psychotic element there. But there wasn't this whole scene after that in the first film that this film does have. Chris tries to run over Carrie, the car flips, car explodes, done. They're dead. In this film, they try to run over Carrie. Carrie stops the car, levitates the car, and even while they're being levitated, I genuinely feel like this character, who has been shown in this movie, who that to be a snotty little brat, to run to her parents when she gets in trouble, because her father comes in at some point to try to try and have everything taken care of because her daughter's been suspended from prom. So he's like, "Oh, do you know who I am?" kind of thing. She is that snotty little brat. So I genuinely feel like she's the type of person if she's faced with something that is going to hurt her in any way, she backs down. She will be the sniveling coward that will beg for her life. What do? Even while she's being fucking levitated in the car, she steps on the gas as if she can still run over Carrie. It just seemed so far of a stretch for me, and it just made me absolutely. I mean, I know you're supposed to hate the bullies in this movie, but I hated her in a way where it just made her a cardboard cutout of she had nothing but hate. Like, at least if they made her sniveling coward at the end of it, at least you could say, well, at least, you see that she's just a teenager and that she's just a little brat. But instead, all I see is, a psychotic killer, someone who has no remorse, no sympathy, and is just a cardboard cutout of someone who is just after Carrie to make her suffer. It's a lot of people can say, well, that's the point, but I can't say that I don't think people like that exist, because people like that do exist, but I just find it so hard to believe in this particular setting because they're trying to make this very broad portrayal of bullies in this country, and they're trying to make it so that we see bullies for who they really are. And I don't see bullies as psychotic killers. I see bullies as cowards. And that's genuinely what bullies are. All they are is cowards who prey on weaker people. And if all of a sudden that person becomes stronger than them, they run away like a coward. Instead, she's trying to go after this bitch like as if she's some psychotic killer. I just don't understand it, and it makes me have no sympathy for what happens. It doesn't make me care at the end. Honestly, I don't give a shit about what happens at the end of this movie. Like, in the first movie, I had genuine remorse and empathy for the fact that all these people were dying, but at the same time, it's like, well, they did push Carrie to this certain extent. Whereas in this movie, it's like, no, just fucking kill him. Who cares? I don't give a shit. Like, I just had no empathy for these people. I didn't care about them at all. And grow even more on top of that, I didn't care about Carrie. I didn't care about her. I didn't think she had suffered all that much. I feel like she had these two major incidents in her life where she was bullied. Whereas, I grew up with years of being bullied. I still came out okay. I'm not saying that everyone is that strong, and I'm not saying that everyone is going to go through the situation the same, but it's like, I don't feel like she was bullied for years on end, and that it was just so frustrating, and that she eventually got to this point where she had just this emotional rage breakout. I feel like she had one or two moments where she was bullied, and then she just exploded, and she was just being cruel, and she was just killing everybody because she had the power to do so. And even leading up a little bit more on that, I also don't like her portrayal of how she uses her psychic abilities, and the fact that she's floating. There was a terrible green screen effect of her floating. It looked awful. The way that Chloe portrays Carrie when she has her psychic abilities, it just looks ridiculous. In the first movie, it was this sort of intensity in Sissy Spacek's eyes, where all she was doing was like, it was just sort of this wide-eyed expression. But in this movie, she does this sort of thing with her hands where it's just like, it just looks fucking ridiculous. Like, I don't know if that was a decision made by the director or if that was a decision made by the actor, but to me, it looked stupid, it looked cheesy, it didn't look real, and especially considering this movie seemed to be trying to base itself in reality, it looked like the stupidest fucking thing, and it totally made me not believe anything that happened in that climax. That entire climax just looked absolutely terrible to me, honestly. The ending was pretty much the exact same as the original film, which I hear the ending in the book was actually far worse. Like I think half the town is killed from what Carrie does, and like, oh, what is that? There's like an event that takes place and like all of America hears about it. But in this movie, it's basically the exact same thing as the film, where you know she goes home, she takes a bath, her mother tries to kill her, house gets rained on by stones, which is was at least partially explained in the first movie because it was a cut scene, and I had listened to the commentary track, and you know I found out that okay, the rocks are kind of explained from a scene that was cut from the film, so but they kept that in for some reason. In this one, there's just genuinely no reason. Like why didn't you include the scene that would have explained that, or why didn't you take that out altogether? Like I still don't understand the whole being crushed by rocks thing. It really makes no fucking sense to me. It may have just been a product of Stephen King's writing, but it's just stupid. I'm sorry, that's just flat out stupid. And even the last few lines of Sue's character, like as she goes to Carrie's grave, it starts playing this terrible pop song, and like it's just the emotions for all of it was genuinely off in a way that it just felt like sort of a really bad MTV, almost My Sweet 16 kind of version of Carrie. It didn't feel real. I will admit the abuse at home is probably more what broke her than the bullying at school, but it's just, I just, the bullying at school is probably the part I'm having the hardest time adjusting to, and it's the hardest thing about this movie that I can't accept. The bullying at home, it was perfectly, honestly, that part was perfectly fine. There were a couple moments where it just felt like she was giving a temper tantrum to her mother, which is not the way I would expect a teenager to act to a parent who's been abusing them their entire life. But overall, the way that the interactions at home were portrayed, I think were fine. It emphasizes the abuse that she's received her entire life. But the bullying at school is the hardest part. I feel like Carrie was just sort of like a shy loner type until 2 weeks leading up to the prom. That's all I felt. I'm sorry that I just kind of keep going on about this, but this movie, like, I just really hated this movie. And there's another scene that I'm remembering now where the bully Chris is going up to Sue while they're decorating for the prom. And she's talking about, you know, rebelling against Miss Desjardins about being suspended from prom. And Sue is telling her, you know, just get over it, move on, you know, you're making a big deal out of this for nothing. And Chris makes a comment like, you're taking Carrie's side when that girl and her mom are saying we're all sinners and we're all going to burn in hell. It just infuriated me because I don't think, especially with the way that they've portrayed Carrie in both adaptations, I don't think that they portray Carrie as the type of person that's going to go up to people and be like, you're a sinner and everything you do is a sin, so you're going to burn in hell. That's something her mother would say. I don't think that's something Carrie would say. So Chris makes the statement of like, Carrie has said all these things about us burning in hell because we act a certain way. It's like, why couldn't you show that to us? It would have elaborated more. It would have given things more context. I just don't feel like anything has been going on in the long term. I feel like everything that's shown in the movie is what has ever happened to Carrie. That is it. Nothing happened before then, nothing happened after. That's all I think when I watch this movie. I forget what the rating is on Rotten Tomatoes. The last time I checked, I think it was somewhere in the 40s. I would honestly put it lower. I think it's probably somewhere in the 20s. The only thing I can really say that I really liked about this movie was the way it was shot. And it might just be because there's the photographer side of me that really appreciates really good cinematography and good production design. You know, there's some really well done and well shot moments in this movie which are genuinely creepy and have a really good feel to them, but the way stuff is written and the way stuff is portrayed just doesn't match it. That's the only problem. Take that for what it's worth. I know there's some people out there that really like this new interpretation of Carrie. I don't think it's anything special. I think it's far worse than the original 1976 film. any changes that were made, I think, don't do much to change the film, and I feel like almost everything that was done to modernize it, almost down to the casting as well, just makes it feel unrealistic and makes it feel cheap and makes it feel almost weak and emotionless. So I can't say I like this movie at all. So please join me in the next review that I'll be doing. So I'll see you guys in the next one.